magical part about digital art is how a single idea can burst into a universe of possibilities. With just a few simple taps and swipes, we can go from this, to this, to this, and even to this. Let's learn how while chatting about over 50 tips, and maybe along the way we'll go over one of the most important concepts of working with digital art and also photography. Let's start by walking through how to go from this version to this version. I can move those two next to each other just to get a close look by holding here and then dragging it over. That'll reorder them. And just to give a quick preview, I can pinch out. We're going to start big, and I'm going to show you how with just a couple of taps, we'll go from this all the way to this. I'm going to open my drawing. With the drawing open, if I tap on the layers panel here, you'll notice that I have a merged version or a pixel duplicate of the entire drawing all the way at the top. I'll show you exactly how to do that in a second. It's a lot easier than you think, but watch this. With that pixel duplicate layer or that merged layer, all I have to do is go up to the adjustments, tap on hue, saturation, brightness, and slide the hue slider all the way to the right. That's it. Just a couple of taps and we've completely changed the look of the drawing. Now we can also use the saturation slider to make the colors a lot juicier and more vibrant, or we can take it over to the left and make them a lot tamer than they usually would be. I'm going to go with bright and colorful, so I'm going to slide it over to the right a little bit. And if you wanted, you could adjust the brightness by moving this one over here or make it a little bit darker. I kind of liked it where it was right in the center, so we're just going to leave that at 50. So again, the hue slider will move, and that's how you can create a ton of different color combinations. Just a couple of taps, move them to the right, to the left, you'll get some other variations. I'm going to stick with all the way to the right. And now we've already got a completely different look with just a couple of taps. If I tap on the adjustment layer again, it will lock in that change, but I can also tap on the screen with one finger, and that'll open up this little menu, which will let me preview and turn things off and on again by tapping in the center. I can cancel the entire adjustment. I can also apply it right now. I could undo the last change, or I could reset everything completely. For now, I'm going to tap apply, and my change is applied. Now let's back up a few seconds here, because if you remember, I started my drawing with a pixel duplicate, or basically a copy of the entire drawing on the top. But how did I get there? First, I'm going to turn off this layer and I'll show you exactly how. We'll start by turning off the layer by tapping on the checkbox, and then I'm just going to tap back onto my canvas to get my drawing again. Now here's the trick. We're going to access another secret menu, which we can access by 3-finger swiping down. See how that little menu popped up right there? This is our copy and paste menu, and what I can do is to use this copy all option. So I'm going to copy everything, and then I'm going to open up a new layer because I want to paste things on a new layer. Now if I tap back on the screen, bring my 3-finger swipe menu down again and tap paste, you won't see that much has changed, but if you see you've got these little marching dots on the side of the screen, or marching ants if you're familiar with Photoshop, and I can check my layer panel here and see now I've got a pixel duplicate or a layer with all of the art merged onto one single layer on top. Now, if you wanted, we could go back and make color changes again by clicking up here, hue, saturation, brightness, create another version, and then we'll have a bunch of different color options within the same file. If I want to undo that, I can just do my 2-finger tap to undo. And I'll show you another trick that you can use so that you don't have to go through that 3-finger swipe, cut and paste every single time. What I can do here is open up my layers panel. And then if I swipe to the left, I'll have the option to duplicate the layer. So now I have another copy of that pixel duplicate layer that I can play around with and always come back to my home base or my original version later. But what if we don't want to go with a super crazy adjustment like this one that we did right here? There's a way that we can apply a very subtle, sort of a filter look to our image that can create some really neat effects as well. I'm going to jump back into the gallery view, and I'm going to duplicate my canvas so that I've got that pixel duplicate layer right at the top already to start. So I'm going to create another copy of my original art just so that I've got that pixel duplicate and I have my original still saved. I could duplicate this layer by clicking select and tapping on it, and then tapping duplicate up here. As an alternative, I can just left swipe. There's a lot of hidden features in Procreate with just a lot of swiping, but I can just swipe to the left and duplicate that entire canvas all at once. Now you might have noticed something. When I created that last duplicate, it didn't show up anywhere here. The trick to remember is that that duplicate ended up all the way at the main home screen. So to take it and pull it into my stack, just grab that new version, pull it over my stack, and then drop it in wherever I want. Now I've got another duplicate. Now let's dive into this new duplicate, and we're going to create that subtle filtered version as well. To do that, let's first make sure I've got my pixel duplicate layer at the top selected here. Perfect. I'm actually going to copy that one just in case I want to use another version of it again later. But with the top layer selected now, I'm going to go back to my adjustments, and then this time we'll select color balance. And the easy way of thinking of this color tool is that it works sort of like asking what team do you want your colors in the drawing to play on. For anything that's in the cyan to red spectrum, you can shift that team alignment over here by just moving this slider further towards cyan or more towards red. So you see these kind of cyan colors here. As I pull this over to the red, they shift closer to the red. But you can probably tell that it's not as drastic of a change as what happened when we used the hue, saturation, and brightness slider. It can be really a lot more subtle. So in order for you to see the difference, I'm going to make them a little bit more dramatic than I usually would, but we can play with any of the colors that are in the image. So I could go, I feel like if I move this over to the right, it's more of like a retro beachy vibe now. And then we can move the blues further over to blue or shift them over into the yellow team or the yellow side. So this is a great way to make some more subtle adjustments to your art and still create some really awesome and fun looks. So now if I take this, let's just go with this one. And again, I can just tap up here to make my change permanent. And now, because I kept that pixel duplicate layer here in the background, I can just toggle on and off to see how it looks before and after. Pretty cool, right? That was, again, just a couple of taps and swipes, and we made another really interesting change that was more like a filtered look to our entire drawing. But I want to show you one more secret that's tucked away in that color balance option. Let's go back to our original pixel duplicate layer. I'm just going to copy that one again, and let's move that one on top by long holding it and dragging above the one at the top. And now I'm going to go back to my color balance options. What you may not have noticed a second ago is that there's a little icon here on the left that will let me target the adjustments that I make between the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights of our drawing. But what does that mean? So if I select the highlights, it's really going to emphasize the brighter parts of the drawing, and it won't touch the darker areas as much. So if I select highlights, and now I move this, you'll see that these little cyan areas over here, they're not really changing a whole lot. What's happening is the brightest parts of the drawing are what are changing. So we can make some really targeted adjustments just by selecting which area is emphasized. So let's really dive in and understand this concept of shadows, midtones, and highlights, because it's going to come in really handy for that last version of the drawing that I showed you, where it was all dark and red, kind of like Dark Side of the Force, Darth Vader vibes. So let's dig in and understand that a lot better. So let's just go back to the original art, which again, I've preserved here by creating that pixel duplicate before. Now what I'm going to do is create another layer on top of it just by tapping the plus sign up here, create a new layer. And let's pick a pen that we will definitely see, probably a bright red color. If we were to go through this drawing and really try to identify those different areas of luminance or lightness and darkness, we would probably pick out these areas as the shadows, right? The really dark areas. If I go around here, around these edges, right? Maybe up there even. Also down here, continues around. These are all dark. This area here is pretty dark. If I draw a little line around this, continues down into there. All right, all of this stuff is pretty dark, even around here. That area is pretty dark. This little loop in the center here. These are some of the darkest areas, and I won't go through every single one, but you can kind of tell these spots are the darkest spots in the drawing, right where the shadows kind of live. Now let's fill in these little spots that we drew with black, because they represent the darkest parts of our image. So we're going to use black to represent that. I'm going to select black from my color panel right up here, and let's drag that black in to fill up these different sections. Another quick tip, if I tap continue filling up here, now I don't have to go back and drag that little circle in every time. I can just tap these different sections, and as long as I've closed off those circles, they will fill in with the right color. So there's black. Again, these are just approximations. So those are our darkest areas of the drawing. Oh, there's one right there. Now let's go back and do the same thing with the brightest areas, the highlights. So if I go back to my red pencil again, let's just go back, grab bright red. And now where are the brightest parts of the drawing? So I would say those live around here. And down in this area, we'll draw another little circle there. Looks like this area is pretty bright. These little lines here are pretty bright. Make sure it's a circle right there. These little spots here, again, I'm not going to be too super careful or precious with highlighting each of these areas, but those are the areas that are white. So we're going to do the same thing. Let's grab white, pull it in. We'll color those areas white, continue filling, tap, tap, tap. And we're filling those areas in with white. So now we've highlighted the brightest areas and the darkest areas. And what's left are the things that are in the middle, right? So those are our midtones. So if I were just to drag kind of a gray tone for something in the middle and just pull it over the whole canvas, now you get a breakdown of which areas are dark, which areas are light, and which areas are kind of in the middle. So let's think about how I could represent this idea, because we have little spots of dark, we have some spots of white, but most of the drawing is kind of in the middle. It's kind of in those mid-tones, right? Neither super white nor super dark. So let's add a new layer. And I am just going to color this one. Let's actually call it a little bit less than white. So I'm going to pick a little bit of a bright gray. And I'm just going to fill this new layer with color because we're going to do something different here. To help us work out this idea, let's draw a little graph. I know it's mathy kind of a little bit, but don't worry, we'll get through this. I promise it'll be easier than you think. The first thing that I'm going to do is turn on my drawing guides. That's over here. And that's going to give me a little grid. If I edit the drawing guide, I could even change the size. I can make it smaller or bigger. It's fine the way it is. You can change the thickness of the lines if you'd like. The opacity, make it darker or lighter. We'll go middle. And we can even change the color. You may not realize, but at the top here, there's a little slider that'll let you change the color of those grid lines. Pretty cool, right? For now, black is going to be just fine. So we'll just grab that and slide it all the way over to the left. And then we'll click done. So from here, I'm now going to draw a few lines. Let's grab a black color so that we can see it. And we've got a good pen. So let's just reduce, let's make it thick. So if I was to draw a horizontal line to start my little graph, I could draw a line, but that line wasn't very straight, right? We're being super mathy now, so we want our lines to be straight. What I'm going to do this time is hold at the end of drawing my line, and that will lock it in to being straight, and I can kind of move it around on my screen. Just as an additional tip, if I hold down one finger while I'm doing this, it'll allow me to draw lines that are in specific angle increments, which can be pretty handy if I'm trying to draw a couple of parallel lines. I don't have to be finicky and try to get it very, very precise. I can just hold that down, and now I have two parallel lines on the screen. Pretty handy, right? One more tip for drawing straight lines, I can go up to my layer, select on the current layer I'm drawing on, turn on the drawing assist, and now that will also only allow me to draw straight lines. It's a quick way of getting straight lines without having to do the draw and hold thing every single time. One final footnote about these straight lines is they will remember the weight of what you drew. What does that mean? If I go in here and grab one of the brushes from one of my Procreate brush packs, now if I draw a line with different weights like so, I often call these my drippy droops when I'm drawing calligraphy art in Procreate, and then I hold at the bottom, you'll see it retains those different weights. It actually doesn't straighten out the whole thing to be perfectly straight. So if you've added some different weights, it's a really handy way to still retain those and still create a straight line. Angle stuff still works the same as well. So let's get back to those graphs. Remember, we were talking about shadows, midtones, and highlights. So I'm going to go back to my technical pen, and now I'm going to draw a straight line. Let's use the drawing assist again. Oh, it's already on. So I'm going to draw a straight line like that. And what this line is going to represent, let's turn drawing assist off, is on this end pure black and on this end pure white. So if I drew a little box, which I can do by just drawing a little square and then holding, and it will try to retain the shape, and then I can hold one finger down to create a perfect square. Pretty handy. And we'll draw another one over here. Let's just keep this one loose just for fun. So if this end of the spectrum represents black, that's black here. And then the right side represents white, so that's white over here. Everything in the middle are gray tones. To demonstrate this concept of this line representing all of the shades from black to white, I'm going to create a box with a gradient in it. First, let's draw the box, but I'm going to put that on a new layer because of that little gradient that we want to do later. Now I'm just going to draw a long rectangle, and we'll just pause at the end to keep things straight there. That looks pretty good. This is where we're going to create the gradient, and there's a secret tip to make this really easy. First, I'm going to create a reference layer out of this layer on top where I have the rectangle, and that's where all the magic lives. So if I tap on the layer and then select reference, this is basically going to restrict what I do on any other layers to what I've drawn onto here. So now if I create a new layer and fill this rectangle with black, it constrains that fill to what's on the reference layer. Normally, if I just dragged into the box with a color, it would just fill the entire screen with black. Here, let me show you. First, I'm going to undo with the 2-finger tap. Let's remove the reference layer by just tapping there. Then we'll go back to our top layer. And now if I drag this in, you'll see the entire screen gets filled with black. That's not what we want. Let's go back to our original layer, make that our reference layer, and returning to layer 85 at the top there. Now I can drag this in, and again, we've got our black rectangle. So how do we create the gradient? It's easier than you think. The next step is we want to turn on the alpha lock on this layer. And what that's going to do is constrain anything we do to just what's drawn on this layer. I can apply the alpha lock by right swiping with 2 fingers on the layer. You can kind of see there's little grids behind the layer there at the top. Or alternatively, I could just tap on the layer and select the alpha lock option. So you can see it's already checked because I did that 2-finger swipe. Now for the cool trick. If I select white at the top here, and then I've got another pen selected, and I'm just going to draw with white, and can you see it's filling in this little space where my black rectangle is? And I could just keep going wherever you want. I'm just going to stop roughly midway and fill that little area in with white. Here's where the magic happens. With that alpha lock selected, all I need to do is go to Gaussian blur. And then if I start moving to the right with my pen on the screen, you'll see it'll start to blur this layer. And what do we have now? We have a gradient. So this now represents our black to white gradient. Pretty cool, right? It also works with any other colors. Let's just do this real quick. I'm going to create a new layer. Remember, I have the reference layer still selected. So I'll tap there to create a new layer. And this time, let's grab a fun color, a dark blue. And let's fill in this rectangle with dark blue. Already a little bit more exciting, right? And remember what the next step is. It's turn on that alpha lock. Let's tap the layer this time and do it this way. Alpha lock on. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. And let's pick some crazy colors and make this one really fun. All right, red right over here. That's pretty cool for the red. Let's next grab, I don't know, this pinkish color right there. And then how about a yellow? Let's go with this yellow. Color that yellow. Let's make it a bunch of yellow here, right there. And then maybe we grab some green right next to the yellow. Right, fill that in. And then what else can we grab? Let's grab whatever that color is, that kind of pinkish color. And then maybe let's go transition to a lighter blue before we get right back to that dark blue. Now that we've got all these colors, same last step, we'll grab our Gaussian blur, just like that. And then as we pull this to the right, see how we get this really cool gradient? And you can fade them in together as much as you'd like just by moving further to the right. How cool is that? So much fun. So that's an easy way to create gradients in Procreate. For now though, back to our story about shadows, midtones, and highlights. Let's turn off our cool gradient, and we're back to our line representing black, grays in the middle, all the way to white. And you know what? Now let's merge our little gradient layer with our graph layer. So I'm just going to pull them together. I just moved it down. And then I'm going to pinch them together. I find that to be the easiest way to merge multiple layers together. Now if I tap here, you'll see that those both live on the same layer. So back to our drawing, remember, these black spots represented the darkest areas of the drawing. But if I really look at those colors, they weren't actually pure black. So let's turn off that representation for a second. And I'm going to turn off the grid because I no longer need it. So toggle off the drawing guide. And I'm going to sample a color around here just to see how black it is. So if I just tap here, I get the little eyedropper tool, and that'll let me kind of analyze much more here. That's pretty dark right there. That's about the darkest spot. And that selected the color and put it up here in my color palette. So if I tap here now, you'll see it's not completely black, right? So completely black would be all the way at the bottom. So this color is actually a little bit brighter than pure black. So what does that mean? If I go back to my graph, right? and I click here, that area that we were just looking at, so the shadows, if I go back to my representation here, these areas were not pure black. They were dark, but not pure black. If I go back to my graph, in terms of darkness, it probably lived somewhere around here, right? It wasn't totally black, but it wasn't very bright either. It's probably, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of stuff that's here in that dark area. And what I'm highlighting here is vertically, I'm trying to represent how much stuff is in that range. So if I draw a straight line there, there's a little bit of stuff that's in this range here, right? Now, if I go back to the drawing again, let's toggle this off. There were areas that were white. And if I go all the way back to the drawing, you'll see these were pretty white. If I tap here on the little square and then toggle here, I'm pretty sure these are close to pure white. Yep, see how the box is all the way in the corner there? That means it's pure white. So as I go back, let's pick red. This time that's easy to see. If I toggle back, grab my graph layer again, and I look at this right edge. That's the pure white edge, right? There was a decent amount of stuff in here that was right at that white edge. So I have to take this bit and continue it all the way over to that area of strong white. So now I have an area here that's dark, I have an area here that's white, and then most of my drawing lives in the middle part. Let's now grab maybe a different color. Let's go blue. And I think the most of my drawing lives here in that middle tones area. So I'm just going to draw a little peak in those middle tones area. So at the tail end here, there's absolutely nothing that's pure black, so it ends down there. This little representation gives us an idea of how much stuff in the drawing lives in the dark, the mid, and the lightest areas of our drawing. And it also goes by the name of a histogram, which is a very valuable tool in the world of editing your art and in photography. A couple more quick tips. If we wanted to label our diagram, we can add text to the drawing by tapping up here, click add, and then add text. And now a little text box appears on our drawing. Now I can use Scribble to write in what I want to put here. Let's call this luminosity. And I can grab that and move it down here. That's actually quite big, right? So if I tap here, I will get options to adjust the size of the font. So I can move it down here. And you'll see I can pick tons of different fonts and options from this menu that shows up as well. Let's grab that and move it here. And next, let's label this axis. We'll go back and add a little bit more text. Remember, I can also tap this out with my keyboard if I'd like. That'll show the keyboard, but Scribble can be easier for some of this stuff. Let's just write amount. And sometimes I find it easier just to use the space bar of, and then stuff. And we can shrink the size like so. Let's make sure the whole thing is selected by double tapping. Then grabbing all of it. And we'll reduce the size. That looks good. And we'll move it over this way. But wait a minute. I want it to go vertically. I can easily do that by tapping the move tool. And if I want to rotate it, I can rotate it like this. But I want it to be perfectly vertical. And this is going to make me kind of finesse how vertical it is just with individual degrees and even fractions of a degree. So that's not exactly what I want. Easy way to fix this is by tapping over here on the left, snapping, turn on magnetics. And now, as I rotate this around, you can see it will follow specific angles. I can now move that over here. And now we have a very cool, very professionally labeled mathy chart or graph. Now, if only there was a way to check if what we did is fairly accurate. There actually is. Now let's get rid of all the fun texts and graphs and stuff that we just created. Let's make sure I've got an active layer selected, and I can just do that by going to one that's on with the little checkbox. And if I go back up to my adjustments, remember we started over here with the hue, saturation, and brightness, and select curves. What do we have here? It looks like we have a graph representing those darks, the midtones, and the lights, similar to what we just talked about. So this is the curves adjustment, which includes a histogram you can see here. And even though we weren't exact, we got pretty close to how this looks, didn't we? I hope that was helpful in now understanding what this little diagram means in this curves adjustment. We're not going to use it to add the fancy last color effect, but the effect that we're going to use relies on this type of a representation. Let's get to that last really cool, I'm going to call it the dark side of the force version of this cool tea. We're going to go back to our gallery. We're going to duplicate this original again. It's going to go back to the main gallery page. Go back there, grab it, drag it into our stack, stick it right next to it, and let's open up this one. First, let's duplicate our merged or pixel layer because it's always good to preserve our original work. And to add this effect, all we have to do is go to the adjustments again. We've been here a few times. And then we're going to add a gradient map. And you'll already see with just that one click, this made a huge dramatic change. But how does this work? There are several options down here at the bottom. So I could click Blaze. That gives me a really cool effect. I could scroll all the way to the left. And you'll see we have a lot of different versions that can add some really cool looks to our art. I'm just going to tap through them here. Breeze, Gradient. That's kind of close to what we had before. Instant, Venice, Blaze, Neon, Noir. This is the one that I used to get that dark side of the force effect. But how do these things actually work? Let's keep the original version. You can tell I've already got a duplicate here. But if I long tap on this, I can delete that effect, or I can duplicate it and then play around with it. So let's go to this duplicate that we just created. So I have a third one. And if I tap on that gradient again, you'll see we have a representation here from left to right. This representation is exactly like that little rectangle that we drew before with a gradient showing black all the way to white. So these little squares that I have in this rectangle, even though it's showing up here right now represents a dark to a light transition, remember that the colors that are selected here can move anywhere. So I can move this bright red over to the shadows and it will turn the shadow colors bright red. So let's try that out. I'm going to grab this bright red. You see what's happening to the darkest areas of the drawing? They're becoming bright red. Remember these little shadow areas? Those were the darkest spots that we highlighted, and now I've dragged this color to make those areas bright red. I could similarly grab my black and drag it all the way over and make the whitest parts of the drawing dark and black. So what's living behind this little bar is that same gradient that we drew before. So think about whatever's down here is the black and darkest areas of the drawing. Whatever's here is the white and light areas of the drawing, and then the middle stuff lives in the center. So with this gradient map, I can apply a specific color to different areas of luminosity or brightness and darkness of my image. So if I grab this area here in the middle, I can pick a completely different color. You see how I have my color picker show up? I can turn this into a very bright purple. That gets a little bit crazy. But maybe if I go to something a little bit more subdued, so there's a black there. So right now it's kind of a monotone look. And what's awesome is that we can add more points just by tapping on any area in the bar. And we can even change those colors. So they don't all have to be kind of a monochrome effect. We could start to pick all sorts of different colors. So a complementary color to red is green. And we can actually find that by tapping here on the color harmony. And if I tap up there and select complementary, bet you didn't know all of this stuff was tucked away in here. See how it's kind of a greenish, tealish color? So if I grab this color now you see how it's changed that look? I could go back over to this side and pick even another color. Maybe we'll go triadic. Let's pick a darker blue. And we can get as crazy. What if we go here and pick, I don't know, some kind of yellow color? Maybe pick something closer to red. I don't know. You can go as crazy or as bonkers as you want. But I hope you see the power of playing around with these gradient maps. You can make some really amazing effects. And then you can even just play around with them. What if I take the red all the way back to the bright area and grab the dark, move it all the way back to the dark? Now we have all sorts of interesting, move these sliders around. I could do this all day. Maybe I don't like one of the colors. I can long press and then delete it. And now I'm back to fewer colors that I'm playing with. Maybe I want to move or get rid of this blue too, or even change the color. I can still do that. Come here, maybe pick something a little bit darker. And then maybe remove this slider around. Maybe it's even a little bit too saturated. Let's reduce the saturation. There we go. That's pretty interesting. Maybe we even make it a little bit less saturated. Ooh, kind of like what's happening there. That's cool. Ooh, we could even go all the way bright, all the way white. I could get lost doing this for ages. Now that's a pretty cool look too. And it's very different from what we did before. Now let's go back and compare this with some of the other versions that we've created. I could tap on the screen to finalize the adjustment, or just tap on the tool again up in the left there, and we'll go back to the gallery. Back at the gallery view, let's treat this like an actual gallery and look at some full screen previews. We can easily see all of our art full screen by just pinching out with any one of the drawings. And then we can navigate between them by swiping, or if I tap once on the screen, I'll get these little markers on the left and the right side that'll let me tap through them as well. We'll just scroll across. Look at that, that's the one that we just created. That's a brand new version. And then these next two that were done with the hue, saturation, and brightness adjustment. This next one was done with the color balance tool. And then back to our gradient map. There's a blue version that I made earlier. There are so many cool and unique looks that we can create. To get out of this preview mode, we just pinch in and that'll close our drawing. But if you wanted to go directly into editing the drawing from this preview mode, all you have to do is double tap on the screen and that will bring you into the editor. Remember, if you want some free Procreate brushes and a ton of other cool stuff, head over to blackletterfreebies.com where you'll get my entire treasure trove of free stuff. You can also head over to my shop for lots of awesome Procreate brushes, calligraphy instructional tools, and much more at blacklettershop.com. And for a free tutorial on how I made that black letter B in Procreate, just watch this video next. In the meantime, keep writing, keep learning, keep playing, and have a fantastic day. I will see you next time.